My aunt saved me from human traffickers until I caught her on the phone. Yes, Vladimir, she believes every word I say. When I confronted her, she just smiled. You'll need these where you're going. I froze in horror. That was 5 years ago. Yesterday, something on her phone made her turn white as death. She hasn't touched food since. My father gave me 1 month to marry his loan shark Vladimir Chechen when I was only 17, so that his casino debt could be paid off. All my life I knew my dad was a gambler, but I didn't know things got this bad. He owed Vladimir over $300, with interest that was stacking and compounding every single day. My father once came to his knees and hugged my legs, saying, "Please, Vladimir's willing to forgive everything if you marry him. He's been extremely patient with us. I don't know how much longer he'll be patient." At first, I thought he was talking about a snowman, but then I remembered who Vladimir was. I met when I was only 14. He'd come by the house for business dinners with my dad and I. He looked like an older Ivan Drago with yellow teeth and a patchy beard. He spoke with the thickest Russian accent you only hear in movies, and whenever he thought I wasn't looking, I felt his eyes drag across my entire body. He asked about my high school plans and whether I was dating anyone. Dad laughed nervously and changed the subject. So now, 3 years later, everything finally made sense. The marriage contract had already been drawn up. I would have to live with Vladimir, produce his offspring within 2 years. While my dad was speaking, I thought about what I could say to the police for help. That's when he burst into laughter. "I can already tell what you're thinking. Vladimir has connections everywhere. Don't even think about alerting the authorities, or you'll just make this harder for yourself." The scariest part wasn't even his anger. It was how calm he was while planning to sell me. He then took my phone and smashed it against the wall before heading to bed. When 3 a.m. hit, I tried to run, but the car wouldn't start. The nearest civilization was 8 miles away. But when you're 17 with no phone and no one coming to save you, 8 miles feels like 80. The next morning, I woke up to find Dad had installed locks on my door from the outside. "Just a precaution," he said, sipping his coffee like he hadn't just turned my bedroom into a cell. I only had one visitor, and that was Vladimir. At first, he would act somewhat bearable, constantly referred to me as his future wife, only touched me on the shoulder or hand. But the more uncomfortable I looked, the more he kept pushing. And soon his hand was glued to my inner thigh whenever we sat together, his fingers pressing harder as he talked about how many kids we'd have. Sometimes I'd glance over to my dad, but his expression was always the same, always nodding in approval, always with a slight smile on his face. But the worst was yet to come. My dad and Vladimir were sitting at the kitchen table when my dad went to the bathroom. Vladimir tried to call me over, but I pretended to be too focused on cooking to hear him. But when his voice turned threatening, I sighed and walked towards him. "Hey," he whispered, the stench of whiskey and cigarettes rotting my nostrils. The second he pulled me onto his lap, my dad walked in. "How are my 2 lovebirds?" my dad exclaimed, before walking over to the oven and checking on the Alfredo. Vladimir whispered again, "Does a pretty thing like you like it from behind?" That was my breaking point. I immediately ran to my room and cried my eyes out. No one came to check on me, until 10 minutes later, when I heard the front door slam and my dad finally walked in. "Dad, I can't do this." "You should be ashamed of yourself," he interrupted. "Vladimir is doing us a huge favor and you're throwing it out the window." I stared at him in disbelief. "Dad, please don't do this. I'll work 3 jobs. I won't sleep. I'll eat 1 meal a day. Whatever it takes to pay off the debt, just not marriage." "No, my word is final," was all he said, before slamming the door and locking it from the outside. From there, I stopped eating, sleeping, showering. It all felt pointless. My head was consumed with desire for my dad to have a heart attack and drop dead. The thoughts made me feel guilty. Then I'd feel anger for feeling guilty. It was a lot. And with 3 weeks left to go until the forced wedding, Aunt Rachel showed up. She was Dad's younger sister who'd moved away years ago after some family drama I never understood. Later that night, she cornered me in the kitchen. "I know what's happening," she whispered. "I've been where you are. My dad tried to sell me off too when I was your age." My heart nearly stopped. Someone finally understood. Aunt Rachel said she'd been monitoring the situation through cousins and couldn't stand by anymore. She had a plan to get me out. I was terrified of being caught, but more terrified of what would happen if I never tried. Aunt Rachel was everything I needed. She'd sneak me food when Dad started monitoring my meals, and she'd create distractions so I could have a few minutes alone to breathe. The night before we were supposed to execute our escape plan, I couldn't sleep, so I crept downstairs to get some water and heard Aunt Rachel on the phone in the guest room. "Yes, Vladimir, she completely trusts me. She'll get in the car willingly tomorrow." I pressed my ear against the door and she continued, "Dad promised me my cut of the trust fund, right? 50,000 like we agreed." My legs nearly gave out. Aunt Rachel had been working with them the entire time. I silently retreated upstairs while Aunt Rachel continued her phone call, my mind racing to process the betrayal. Each step felt heavier than the last as the reality crashed over me. She'd played me perfectly, pretending to understand my pain, offering hope when I had none left. My hands shook as I reached my bedroom door. Back in my locked bedroom, I realized tomorrow's escape was actually delivery to Vladimir. The car ride Aunt Rachel promised would take me to safety was really taking me away from any possible help. I pressed my back against the door and slid down to the floor, trying to think through the panic flooding my system. I searched my room desperately for anything that could be used as a weapon or communication device. My fingers ran along every surface, checking drawers I'd already emptied a dozen times. Behind the dresser, my hand brushed against something unexpected, an old landline phone jack that Father had missed when confiscating my electronics. My heart pounded as I remembered Father's old rotary phone stored in the closet. I pulled boxes aside frantically until I found it wrapped in an old sweater. With trembling hands, I plugged it into the jack and lifted the receiver. The faint dial tone that greeted me was the first real hope I'd felt in weeks. I realized I only knew one phone number by heart, my best friend Maya's house landline. We'd memorized each other's numbers in middle school as a joke, competing to see who could recite them faster. Now that silly game might save my life. At 3 a.m., I carefully dialed Maya's number, praying her parents wouldn't answer instead. Each rotation of the dial felt like an eternity. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when I heard a groggy voice. Maya answered sleepily, but became instantly alert when I whispered my situation. I explained everything in rushed, broken sentences. The debt, the forced marriage, Aunt Rachel's betrayal. Maya didn't interrupt, didn't question whether I was exaggerating. She just listened. Maya revealed she'd been worried for weeks since I'd stopped showing up to school. The teachers had asked about me, and she'd tried calling my cell phone dozens of times. When I told her about father smashing it, she made a sound of disgust. I learned father had told the school I was being homeschooled due to family illness. He'd submitted official paperwork and everything. The realization hit me hard. He'd been planning this much longer than I'd thought. This wasn't desperation, it was calculated. Maya promised to help, but warned her own parents would probably call my father if they knew. We both understood the risk. Adults rarely believe teenagers about things like this, especially when the other adults seemed so normal on the surface. We established code words for future calls, and Maya agreed to research escape options quietly. If I said I was studying for the history test, it meant I was in immediate danger. Working on the science project meant I was okay for now. We'd developed the system within minutes, both of us understanding the stakes. The next morning, Aunt Rachel acted overly cheerful about escape day, making my skin crawl. She hummed while making breakfast, shooting me conspiratorial winks whenever father wasn't looking. Her performance was flawless, the concerned aunt helping her trapped niece. Father seemed unusually relaxed, humming while making breakfast. He hadn't hummed in years, not since before Mom died. The sound made my stomach turn. He knew the outcome was already decided, knew that by tonight I'd be Vladimir's property. I forced myself to act excited about the escape to avoid suspicion. I packed a small bag under Aunt Rachel's watchful eye, nodding along as she explained the route we'd take. Every smile felt like broken glass in my mouth. Aunt Rachel insisted I pack everything important for our journey. She stood in my doorway, making sure I included the few pieces of jewelry Mom had left me. "You'll want these for your new life," she said, and I wondered if she knew they'd probably be sold. During packing, I hid father's old phone in my coat lining and memorized Maya's number again. I repeated it in my head like a prayer, terrified I'd forget it when I needed it most. The phone's weight against my ribs was oddly comforting. Vladimir arrived earlier than expected, claiming he wanted to wish his bride farewell properly. His car pulled up at noon instead of evening. Through my window, I watched him check his watch and smile. Everything was proceeding on schedule. Father and Aunt Rachel exchanged meaningful looks when Vladimir suggested one last private conversation. All three adults were clearly coordinating against me, and they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Why bother with pretense when the victim was already trapped? They forced me into the living room alone with Vladimir, while the others went to prepare final details in the kitchen. I could hear them talking in low voices, occasionally laughing. The sound of their casual conversation while I sat with my future captor made bile rise in my throat. Vladimir became more aggressive, describing our wedding night in graphic detail. He assumed I couldn't escape, so all his previous restraint vanished. His hand found my knee, then my thigh, as he talked about the children we'd have and how I'd learned to please him properly. I realized this preview was meant to break my spirit completely before tomorrow. Every word was calculated to make me understand resistance was futile. He wanted me defeated before I even left the house, too broken to try running during the car ride. I pretended to be defeated and submissive, which encouraged Vladimir to reveal more of their plan. I kept my eyes down, nodded when he expected it, even managed to force out a few words of agreement. The performance made me sick, but it worked. Vladimir mentioned the compound upstate where I'd live, confirming this wasn't just a local arrangement. He described high fences, security cameras, other girls who'd adjusted well to their new lives. The geographical isolation was another control tactic. Even if I escaped the house, where would I go? Father returned with a fake smile, acting like a proud father giving away his daughter. He clapped Vladimir on the shoulder, made jokes about young love, even suggested taking photos to commemorate the day. The normalcy of his behavior in such a horrible situation was surreal. Aunt Rachel pulled me aside for what she called our final escape briefing, maintaining her charade even though I knew the truth. She gripped my shoulders with false concern, explaining how we'd leave at 6 in the morning for the safe house. Her eyes sparkled with something I now recognized as enjoyment. She was savoring this deception, taking pleasure in manipulating my hope. A slight smile played at her lips as she detailed our supposed escape route. During her fake planning session, I learned the real timeline. The car would leave at 6 a.m. tomorrow, supposedly taking me to safety. Aunt Rachel instructed me to be completely trusting and compliant during the ride. She emphasized this point repeatedly, her hands squeezing my arms as she spoke. The desperation she was counting on would be her weapon against me. That evening, I excused myself for what I claimed would be my last shower in this house. Once the bathroom door locked behind me, I retrieved the hidden phone from my coat and dialed Maya's number. My hands trembled as I kept the water running to mask any sound. Maya had spent the day researching trafficking resources and had found a domestic violence hotline number. She recited it to me twice while I memorized it, knowing I couldn't write anything down. We planned for Maya to call the police if she didn't hear from me by 7 a.m. tomorrow. The deadline gave us a small window, but it was better than nothing. I gave Maya the license plate number from Aunt Rachel's car that I'd memorized earlier when she'd parked in our driveway. Maya repeated it back to confirm she had it right. Every detail mattered now. Father knocked on the bathroom door, his voice sharp with suspicion about the long shower. I quickly hid the phone back in my coat and emerged, water still dripping from my hair. I told him I was making peace with tomorrow, trying to accept my new life. His expression showed he knew exactly what tomorrow would bring, and he was satisfied with my apparent resignation. At dinner, all three adults raised their glasses in a toast to new beginnings. I forced myself to participate, lifting my water glass with a trembling hand. They clinked glasses enthusiastically while I fought to keep my expression neutral. The celebration of my upcoming captivity made my skin crawl. Vladimir presented what he called an engagement gift, pulling out an expensive necklace from a velvet box. The piece was heavily jeweled but designed more like a collar than jewelry. The chain was thick, the clasp sturdy, and the pendant hung heavy like a weight. I realized this gift was a symbol of ownership, not affection. All three adults watched my reaction carefully. I thanked him with downcast eyes while internally planning how I might use the chain as a weapon if needed. The metal was strong enough to cause damage if swung correctly. I clasped it around my neck at his insistence, feeling the weight settle against my throat. Father decided to have what he called a father-daughter talk, though it was really a final intimidation session about family loyalty. He spoke about duty, about sacrifice, about how families help each other. His words were carefully chosen to make me feel guilty for any thoughts of resistance. He reminded me how he'd raised me alone phone after Mom died, how hard he'd worked, how much he'd sacrificed. That night, I lay awake listening to the adults planning in the living room below. Their voices carried through the floorboards, and I pressed my ear to the floor to hear better. I learned about the compound location upstate, about 2 hours north. Vladimir mentioned his other wives who lived there, girls who had adjusted well to their new lives. My stomach churned, realizing I wasn't his first victim. I discovered Aunt Rachel would receive $50,000 for delivering me, plus monthly payments for each successful delivery she made. The business arrangement was clear in their discussion. This wasn't her first time, and it wouldn't be her last. She had done this before, making her far more dangerous than Father or Vladimir. She was a professional trafficker hiding behind the mask of a concerned relative. The revelation made everything clear. This was an organized business operation, not just a desperate debt solution. Father's gambling debt was real, but it had become an opportunity for something much larger. They discussed the infrastructure, the network, the system they'd perfected. I overheard them planning backup strategies if I resisted during transport. They would use restraints if necessary, though Aunt Rachel assured them I trusted her completely. She suggested they could substance my morning coffee if I seemed suspicious, just a little something to keep me calm and compliant. The casual way she discussed drugging me confirmed how experienced she was at this. The knowledge that I'd be drugged made escape even more urgent. I had to get out tonight or risk losing consciousness during the fake rescue. Once they drugged me, I'd be helpless to resist or call for help. The window for action was closing rapidly. I waited until 2 a.m. when the house finally fell silent. Using techniques Maya had researched and shared during our calls, I worked on the door lock with an earring and bobby pin. My fingers cramped from the delicate work, and sweat dripped down my back despite the cool night air. After 30 agonizing minutes, the lock finally clicked open. I crept back to retrieve the hidden phone and dialed the domestic violence hotline number Maya had found. My voice shook as I explained my situation to the counselor who answered. Unlike other adults, she took me seriously immediately and began coordinating a rescue. Her calm, professional response gave me hope. The counselor explained they needed precise timing and location to intercept before I was moved. She asked detailed questions about the plan, the timeline, the vehicle. I provided Aunt Rachel's license plate number and the planned 6 a.m. departure time. Every detail was crucial for the intervention to work. She arranged for plainclothes officers to be positioned nearby at 5:30 a.m. They would wait for the right moment to intervene, ensuring all parties were present and the evidence was clear. The counselor emphasized I needed to act normally until then, to avoid raising suspicion that might accelerate their timeline. I returned to my room and carefully relocked the door from the inside, making it appear undisturbed. The next few hours would require the performance of my life. I had to seem defeated and compliant, while knowing exactly what they'd planned for me. Morning arrived too quickly. I forced myself to drink the coffee Aunt Rachel brought me, though I knew it might be drugged. Within minutes, a slight dizziness washed over me, confirming my suspicions. My vision blurred slightly at the edges, but I managed to stay conscious. The dose was calculated to make me manageable, not unconscious. Aunt Rachel seemed disappointed that I wasn't more affected. She watched me carefully, noting my movements and reactions. I deliberately swayed slightly when I stood, exaggerating the substance's effects to match her expectations. Father loaded my bag into Aunt Rachel's car, while Vladimir made final preparations on his phone, speaking rapidly in Russian. Through my artificially blurred vision, I watched them coordinate like a well-oiled machine. This routine was familiar to them. I realized I needed to delay departure until the police arrived at 5:30 a.m. Every minute mattered now. I suddenly clutched my stomach and asked to use the bathroom one more time, claiming nausea from nerves. Aunt Rachel's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but she couldn't refuse such a basic request. In the bathroom, I tried to induce vomiting to clear some of the substances from my system. I needed every bit of clarity I could manage for what was coming. The effort was partially successful, though I had to be quiet to avoid alerting them. Aunt Rachel grew impatient and demanded I come out immediately. Her voice had lost its fake sweetness, replaced by cold authority. I emerged, making sure to appear unsteady on my feet. I let her believe the substances were working better than they were. Father started the car while Aunt Rachel guided me toward the vehicle. She held my arm like I was an invalid, her grip firm and controlling. I let myself lean on her slightly, playing the part of the drugged victim while my mind raced with awareness of every detail. At 5:25 a.m., I pretended to stumble and dropped my bag, scattering its contents across the driveway. While Aunt Rachel and Father gathered the items, I spotted an unmarked van positioning itself across the street. My heart pounded, but I kept my expression blank and confused. Aunt Rachel suddenly realized I was stalling. Her face transformed from fake concern to genuine anger. For the first time, she became physically violent, grabbing my arm hard enough to leave bruises. Her mask had finally come off completely. She forced me toward the car with surprising strength. Just as the car doors closed around me, plainclothes officers emerged from multiple positions and surrounded the vehicle. Their timing was perfect. All three conspirators were together, caught in the act of transporting me. The trap had been sprung. Aunt Rachel immediately switched tactics, claiming she was rescuing me from Father. Her ability to instantly flip the narrative showed her experience with law enforcement. She portrayed herself as the hero, the concerned aunt trying to save her niece from a terrible situation. The officers separated all parties into different vehicles for individual questioning. I was placed in an unmarked car with a female detective who spoke gently but professionally. I showed her the fresh bruises on my arm and explained everything I'd overheard. The hidden phone came out of my coat, revealing my lifeline to the outside world. The detective asked if I'd managed to record any conversations. Following Maya's earlier advice, I had captured portions of their planning session on the phone. The poor quality didn't matter. Their voices were clear enough, their words damning. The financial arrangements, the drugging plan, the mention of other victims, all provided evidence of a conspiracy. The recordings revealed clear evidence of the trafficking conspiracy. Father's voice talking about the debt and arrangement, Aunt Rachel discussing her payment and previous deliveries, Vladimir mentioning his compound and other wives. The detective's expression grew grimmer with each piece of evidence. Father tried to claim this was simply a family business arrangement when questioned. He insisted no laws were broken, that arranged marriages were cultural traditions. But the recordings contradicted his story, showing the financial transaction and criminal nature of their plan. plan. When confronted with the evidence, Aunt Rachel's survival instincts kicked in. She attempted to negotiate a deal by revealing information about other victims. Her quick pivot from denial to cooperation confirmed she'd been through this before. She knew how the system worked. The investigation expanded rapidly to include the compound location and the other girls Aunt Rachel had mentioned. What started as my rescue became something much larger. Multiple agencies became involved as the scope of the trafficking operation became clear. I learned I was victim number 3 in Aunt Rachel's operation. She had successfully delivered 2 other girls to similar situations over the past 5 years. My instincts about her expertise had been correct. She wasn't a desperate relative making a terrible choice. She was a professional who had perfected her method. Officers coordinated a raid on the compound, while Aunt Rachel provided details in exchange for consideration on her charges. She gave up locations, names, and methods with the cold efficiency of someone cutting a business deal. Her lack of remorse was chilling. I was taken to a social services facility, while the adults were processed and charged. The building was clean and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the morning. A social worker brought me water and a blanket, treating me with the first genuine kindness I'd experienced in weeks. Maya's parents arrived at the facility within hours, having been contacted by police as emergency support. They'd known something was wrong when Maya had been so worried about me. They hugged me tightly, promising I was safe now. Their presence felt like a miracle. I learned Maya's family wanted to provide temporary foster placement, while the courts decided on permanent custody arrangements. They'd already spoken with social services about the requirements. Maya's mother held my hand as she explained I'd have a room of my own, that I'd be part of their family for as long as I needed. The social worker explained I would need to testify eventually, but I had strong legal protections as a trafficking victim. There were advocates who would help me through the process, counselors who specialized in trauma recovery. I wasn't alone anymore. That night, I had my first safe sleep in weeks. The bed in Maya's family's guest room felt like a cloud compared to my locked bedroom. I knew the adults who'd planned to sell me couldn't reach me anymore. The door locked from the inside, and I had control of that lock. The court proceedings began with me as a protected witness giving testimony from a separate room via video link. The prosecutor walked me through the events step by step, and I recounted everything that had happened. My voice stayed steady as I described the forced marriage arrangement, Aunt Rachel's deception, and the trafficking operation I'd uncovered. The prosecution presented evidence showing a systematic trafficking operation with multiple victims. Bank records showed Aunt Rachel's payments from similar deliveries dating back 5 years. Phone records confirmed communications between all 3 conspirators. The compound Vladimir mentioned was real, located in a rural area 2 hours north. Father pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges in exchange for cooperation against Vladimir and Aunt Rachel. His lawyer negotiated a reduced sentence in return for detailed testimony about the operation. Watching him admit his crimes on the stand felt surreal. The man who'd raised me was confessing to selling his own daughter. When confronted with mounting evidence, Aunt Rachel attempted to negotiate a better deal by revealing her network of other families she'd infiltrated as the rescuing relative. She'd perfected her method, identifying vulnerable girls in difficult family situations, gaining their trust, then delivering them to buyers. Her testimony exposed a web of exploitation that had trapped multiple teenagers. The investigation revealed Aunt Rachel had successfully trafficked 2 other girls before targeting me. One was recovered during the compound raid, traumatized but alive. The other had aged out of Vladimir's interest and been discarded, her whereabouts unknown. Learning about these other victims made my escape feel even more miraculous. Vladimir was arrested at the compound with evidence of holding the other teenage girl against her will. Police found locks on bedroom doors, security cameras monitoring every room, and documentation of his marriages to underage girls. His arrest happened without incident. He'd grown complacent, never expecting his operation to be exposed. My testimony helped secure convictions for all 3 conspirators. The prosecutor used my recorded conversations as key evidence, along with the physical evidence from the compound. The bruises on my arm, photographed that morning, proved Aunt Rachel's violence when her mask slipped. Every detail I'd memorized became another nail in their legal coffins. The judge's verdict came down hard on all 3 defendants. Father received 8 years for conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Aunt Rachel got 15 years as the primary facilitator with multiple victims. Vladimir received 25 years for running the trafficking operation and holding victims captive. Hearing their sentences felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in months. During the legal proceedings, victim services helped me apply for crime victim compensation to cover therapy and educational expenses. The application process was straightforward, designed to help trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. A victim advocate guided me through each form, explaining my rights and available resources. The court granted me an emergency order of protection against all 3 conspirators. The order would remain in effect even after their eventual releases from prison. Having that legal document felt like armor, proof that the system recognized the danger they posed and would help keep me safe. Maya's family formally petitioned for guardianship while I was still 17. The court approved their application quickly, given the circumstances. Maya's parents had undergone background checks and home visits from social services. Their genuine care for my well-being impressed everyone involved in the case. I returned to high school with accommodations for the time I'd missed. The administration worked with me to create a modified schedule that would let me graduate on time. My teachers provided extra support, understanding I was dealing with trauma while trying to catch up academically. Some days were harder than others, but I pushed through. Maya became more than my best friend. She became my sister in every way that mattered. We shared a room by choice, staying up late talking through my nightmares and fears. She never treated me like a victim, just someone who'd survived something terrible. Her normalcy helped me find my own again. Other students whispered when I returned, but I focused on my studies. The gossip eventually died down as newer dramas captured their attention. I joined the debate team, finding my voice through structured arguments about justice and human rights. Speaking up in controlled settings helped me prepare for future advocacy. Victim services connected me with a support group for trafficking survivors. The group met weekly at a community center, led by a counselor who specialized in trauma recovery. Hearing other survivors' stories helped me understand I wasn't alone. We supported each other through court dates, therapy sessions, and difficult anniversaries. I started volunteering with a local organization that educated teenagers about trafficking risks. Speaking at high schools about recognizing warning signs felt like turning my trauma into purpose. If my story could help one teenager recognize danger and seek help, the pain would mean something. My 18th birthday arrived with quiet celebration at Maya's house. Her parents made my favorite dinner while Maya decorated with handmade banners. No massive party, just the people who'd become my real family. That evening, I legally became an adult, free to make my own choices, something that had almost been stolen from me forever. College applications consumed my senior year. I focused on schools with strong pre-law programs and victim advocacy resources. My personal essay wrote itself, a story of survival, resilience, and determination to help others. Several schools offered significant financial aid, recognizing both my academic potential and unique perspective. The acceptance letter from my top choice arrived in spring, a state school with an excellent legal program and active survivor support network. Maya got accepted to the same university, planning to study social work. We'd remain roommates, continuing the sisterhood that had saved my life. Graduation day felt like a victory I'd almost been denied. Walking across that stage in cap and gown, I saw Maya's parents in the audience cheering louder than anyone. They'd given me more than a home. They'd given me a chance at the future I deserved. My diploma represented freedom earned through survival. That summer, I worked at a local law firm as a file clerk. The attorneys knew my story and encouraged my legal ambitions. They let me observe court proceedings and explained legal procedures. One partner, a former prosecutor, became an informal mentor, sharing insights about victim advocacy within the legal system. I testified before a state legislative committee about gaps in trafficking laws. My voice shook at first, but strengthened as I spoke about vulnerable teenagers needing protection. The committee listened intently as I explained how predators exploit family situations and trust. Several legislators thanked me for my courage in speaking out. A letter arrived from prison, father attempting to apologize and seek forgiveness. I read it once, then filed it away without responding. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. His choices had nearly destroyed my life, and I owed him nothing. Forgiveness might come someday, but not yet. The compound where Vladimir held his victims was demolished by court order. I attended the demolition with the other survivor we'd rescued. Watching those walls come down felt like closing a chapter. We held hands as the building collapsed, two teenagers who'd escaped what those walls represented. My first day of college arrived with nervous excitement. Maya helped me decorate our dorm room with photos of our real family, her parents, our friends, the life I'd built after escape. The trafficking attempt felt like a lifetime ago, though barely 2 years had passed. I was ready for this new chapter. Pre-law classes challenged me in the best way. Criminal justice, constitutional law, victim rights, every subject connected to my experience while expanding my understanding. My professors encouraged my passion for victim advocacy, suggesting internships and research opportunities. I threw myself into studies with purpose. The survivor support group on campus became another anchor. We met monthly, sharing struggles with triggers, celebrating victories like good grades or healthy relationships. Some members were trafficking survivors. Others had escaped different traumas. We understood each other without judgment. I started dating cautiously sophomore year. Trust came slowly after what I'd experienced. My boyfriend understood when I needed space, never pushing boundaries. He came from a normal, loving family, the kind I'd thought only existed in movies. His parents welcomed me warmly, never making me feel like damaged goods. An internship at the district attorney's office focused my career goals. Working with prosecutors on trafficking cases, I saw how the legal system could protect victims when it worked properly. I also saw the gaps that let predators operate. My supervisor encouraged me to consider prosecution as a career path. Junior year brought leadership opportunities. I became president of the campus survivor advocacy group, organizing awareness events and support resources. We partnered with local organizations to educate students about trafficking risks. My story became a teaching tool, stripped of identifying details but powerful in its truth. A scholarship for trafficking survivors covered my final year's expenses. The application required an essay about using education to help others. I wrote about transforming from victim to advocate, from silenced teenager to empowered voice. The scholarship committee said my essay moved them to tears. Law school applications filled senior year. My academic record was strong, bolstered by internships and advocacy work. Letters of recommendation came from professors, prosecutors, and survivor organizations. Each application felt like a step toward the future I was building from the ashes of what almost was. The acceptance letter from a top law school arrived with a full scholarship. They valued my unique perspective and commitment to victim advocacy. Maya got accepted to graduate social work programs nearby. We'd continue our journey in the same city, still sisters by choice. College graduation felt different from high school, less about survival, more about achievement. Maya's parents sat in the front row again, now legally my parents too after adult adoption proceedings. They'd made it official. I was their daughter in every way. My chosen family celebrated the woman I'd become. That summer before law school, I worked at a national trafficking hotline. Every call reminded me why this work mattered. Some callers were teenagers like I'd been, trapped and desperate. I guided them to resources, coordinated rescues, offered hope. My survival story became their lifeline. 5 years after that morning when police surrounded Aunt Rachel's car, I stood before another legislative committee. This time, I testified as a law student with expertise in trafficking statutes. My recommendations came from both personal experience and legal education. Several of my suggestions made it into strengthened protection laws. Starting law school, I moved into a small apartment near campus. Maya lived 3 blocks away, starting her social work graduate program. We met for coffee every week, maintaining the bond that began with a desperate 3 a.m. phone call. Our friendship had evolved but never weakened. My first year of law school challenged everything I thought I knew about justice. Criminal law, constitutional protections, victim rights. Each class added layers to my understanding. I joined the trafficking law clinic, working on real cases under supervision. My personal experience informed my legal approach. Today, I work as a prosecutor specializing in trafficking cases. My office walls hold my diplomas and bar admission certificate. Each case I handle honors the girl who almost became property, the survivors I represent 100% see someone who understands their trauma firsthand. I used the voice that was almost silenced to speak for those still finding theirs. Maya works as a social worker at the same survivor services organization that helped me. We often collaborate on cases, combining legal and social support for trafficking victims. Our shared history makes us an effective team. That terrified teenager who memorized her friend's phone number couldn't have imagined this future. Some nights I still dream about locked doors and drugged coffee. The trauma never fully disappears, but each morning I choose to transform that pain into purpose. Every conviction, every survivor helped, every protection law strengthened. They're all victories against the darkness that almost consumed me.